Today, I'll tell you about a unique film. It's the latest action film, combines gunfights, sci-fi, and horror. This place is located at the border between two countries, a mysterious canyon shrouded in thick fog all day long. For some unknown reason, it requires a top agent and an elite sniper from the Marine Corps to guard it together. No one knows how deep this canyon really is, nor what terrifying secrets lie within it. However, the strange sounds that often emerge, making the guards from both countries realize that humanity seems to be facing an unprecedented disaster. What kind of world lies behind the fog? Can they successfully prevent the disaster from occurring? The story begins a few days ago. Anya is Lithuania's top agent. After perfectly completing another assassination mission, she was sent by her organization to a canyon. In the days that followed, she would carry out a secret guarding mission in this watchtower soaring into the sky. Anya felt confused after hearing this. After all, no matter how you looked at it, this place didn't seem like anyone would come here. On the other side, former elite Marine Corps sniper Mike was urgently recalled after 4 years of retirement. At this time, a female officer had been waiting for him for a long time. After inquiring about Mike's basic information, she sent a private plane to take him to a desolate area. After Mike parachuted from the sky, he landed in a densely vegetated river valley. He then climbed over mountains and valleys, and finally arrived at the mission area, which was also this mysterious canyon, shrouded in fog for years and rarely visited by anyone. Next, he successfully met with the former guard Dre. Dre warmly introduced him to everything about this place, but Dre seemed to know very little about it as well. Then he took Mike to a lookout point, indicating that this was the resting place for the guards. The supplies inside are plentiful. The only thing missing is communication equipment, because during the guarding period, they cannot have any contact with the outside world. Just then, Mike noticed that a watchtower also stood on the opposite side. Dre timely clarified this for him. He indicated that there were also guards stationed in that tower. However, the rules strictly forbid contact between the two sides. However, the entire canyon, from north to south, is filled with landmines and deadly strategic obstacles, so this regulation is actually useless, because they can't reach the opposite side at all. Although Dre spoke very casually, Mike still felt uneasy. Looking at the various heavy weapons in the canyon, he couldn't help but ask what exactly was in the canyon. Unexpectedly, Dre told him, the canyon is the gateway to hell, and they are the guardians of the gates of hell. Mike found it hard to believe after hearing this, but Dre's expression was very serious. He continued to explain that their task was not, as Mike had guessed, to guard the canyon entrance and prevent others from entering, but rather to ensure that the monsters inside do not escape. Mike instinctively thought he was talking nonsense, but just then, a strange scream suddenly echoed from the canyon. Dre stated that this was the monster he had just mentioned, but no one knows what that thing looks like. Long ago, the guards referred to it as the Hollow Man. This practice has continued to this day. In the late 1840s, the League of Nations dispatched 2,400 cavalrymen, attempting to kill those strange monsters. However, in the end, not a single one returned from the canyon. Since then, the League of Nations changed its strategy from offense to defense. They set traps within the canyon to prevent the Hollow Men from escaping the canyon. Mike felt even more uneasy after hearing this. That night, he contemplated Dre's words. He then wrote down his feelings about the day in his notebook. Next, he placed his machine gun within reach. Only then could he barely enter his dreams. The next morning, Dre took a helicopter out of the canyon. However, the extraction team, after confirming his identity, immediately killed him. They let his body fall into the abyss. It turned out this was what the League of Nations called a handover. On the other side, Mike officially began his days of guarding alone. Every day, he diligently patrolled the West Canyon, sending radio reports on the situation at scheduled intervals. However, aside from that, his life was rather dull. Mike could only sift through the materials left by his predecessors. Unexpectedly, he discovered behind the bookshelf some messages carved into the wall. Curious, Mike read a few lines. He found that they were all inspiring words. This brought comfort to his lonely heart, but the days of guarding remained very boring. That night, Mike couldn't help but pick up the binoculars to observe the opposite side. He discovered that the guard in the east tower was actually a woman. Anya also keenly sensed that someone seemed to be watching her, so she extinguished the candle, but she couldn't stop the fire burning in Mike's heart. After that day, a subtle change occurred in their relationship. They observed each other through the binoculars every day. Finally, one day, Anya couldn't hold back any longer. She fired a shot into the sky. The gunshot caught Mike's attention. When he looked through the binoculars again, Mike saw Anya holding up a handwritten sign. She was initiating communication with him. But unexpectedly, Mike became reserved at that moment. He replied that according to the rules, they were forbidden from talking. However, Anya didn't care about that. She directly shot Mike's water bottle in the house with a sniper rifle. This shot completely ignited that night. Mike, not wanting to be outdone, fired back. However, just at that moment, Anya suddenly signaled him with a serious expression to look down towards the bottom of the canyon. Mike immediately perked up to check. At first, due to the darkness, he couldn't find anything unusual. However, Anya, through the binoculars, noticed a faint movement. It looked like a vague figure was slowly moving. At this point, Mike also sensed something was off, and he quickly raised his rifle. Mike put his eye close to the scope and stared down. This time, he finally saw what was in the canyon. An unknown object was climbing up the cliff. Its movements were strange and swift. What was even more chilling was that these creatures had human faces. The twisted features appeared particularly ferocious in the darkness. Mike pulled the trigger without hesitation. As he accurately hit the target, he successfully detonated the bomb below. In an instant, a shockwave hit him. He instinctively ducked backward. However, the unknown creatures in the canyon kept coming. Anya quickly set up her machine gun to help Mike clear out these strange creatures. Under the intense firepower, the monsters in the canyon were temporarily pushed back. The surroundings fell into a dead silence. It felt as if the fierce battle just now was merely an illusion. At this moment, Mike recalled Dre's words. He realized that these strange monsters were probably the legendary Hollow Men. Just then, Anya sharply detected a faint sound coming from below her feet. A sense of foreboding came over her. Her heartbeat suddenly quickened. Anya cautiously looked down, but unexpectedly, a Hollow Man didn't know when to climb up the watchtower. Its face was extremely ugly and twisted. It had what looked like animal feet on its head. Anya's breathing instantly became rapid. She quickly drew her pistol and shot it back. However, the crisis was not yet over. There were actually many Hollow Men climbing below the tower. Anya dared not hesitate and raised her gun to shoot. At the same time, Mike was providing fire support from a distance. But unexpectedly, the falling Hollow Man rolled and crashed into the explosives. A violent explosion rang out. Anya was hit in the shoulder by flying shrapnel. Mike quickly set up a heavy machine gun. He fiercely sprayed bullets at the Hollow Men on the opposite side. The dense hail of bullets swept away like a torrential storm. On the other side, Anya quickly got back on her feet. She swallowed the pain in her shoulder and fought on. Countless bullets intertwined in the canyon, forming a deadly web of firepower. That brought down the monsters trying to climb up. At this moment, a Hollow Man triggered the alarm line. In an instant, all the Gatling guns around activated. The firepower surged to its peak. Bullets whizzed through the canyon like raindrops. It was hard to tell how long it had been. The flames and smoke in the canyon dissipated. Mike finally saw Anya on the opposite side again. She also noticed his gaze. Then she held up the whiteboard she used for communication, indicating that this was the most exciting birthday of her life. Mike finally smiled. This thrilling battle had temporarily come to an end. The time came to the next morning. Mike immersed himself in the urgent repair work. After all, he didn't want to experience those strange monsters again. But just as he was resetting the explosives on the cliff, a uniquely shaped flying device rose from deep within the canyon and stopped in front of him. Anya, high above, immediately raised her gun in caution. Immediately after, the nearby Gatling gun also locked onto the target. But the next second, it inexplicably lowered its gun. And that suspicious flying device also flew away. At the moment Mike turned around. What the hell was going on? What did the appearance of this flying device mean? In the blink of an eye, it was December. The weather gradually became colder. During this time, Mike continued his regular patrols and reports. However, due to Anya's presence, his guarding work was no longer unbearable. They maintained distant communication every day, using gestures and signs to convey their thoughts and feelings. They even built snowmen on snowy days, as if they were keeping each other company. However, on a day in February, Anya was feeling very down. With an upset look, she held up a sign, expressing her sadness to Mike. After reading the words on the sign, Mike's mood remained unsettled for a long time. So the next day, he went to the warehouse to take out a rocket and skillfully began to modify it. Then he pushed a bundle of ropes outside. Anya watched Mike's actions from the watchtower. Not until he set up the roped rocket launcher did she finally understand his intention. A glimmer of surprise and expectation flashed in her eyes. Mike steadied himself and pulled the trigger. With a sharp roar, the rockets flew precisely across the wide canyon to the other side. Anya immediately understood his meaning and quickly ran down the watchtower. While using a fire extinguisher to put out the burning branches, she secured the rope to a sturdy tree. When she returned to the watchtower again and looked across the canyon through the binoculars, Mike was holding a wooden board which read, "Can we have dinner together tonight?" Anya's heart raced uncontrollably. She took a deep breath and agreed. So, after Mike finished his routine tasks, he tidied himself up carefully. Then he picked some flowers he had grown himself, slid down the rope to the opposite side quickly. But the canyon was simply too wide, causing him to stop midway due to lack of momentum. Below him was a valley shrouded in mist, from which eerie and ominous roars echoed. Feeling a surge of fear in his heart, Mike clutched the rope with both hands and climbed forward. Finally, he reached the opposite side safely. The two, filled with affection, finally met. Anya's joy was evident on her face. She took the initiative to invite Mike to dinner. Then they sat on the watchtower, drinking and chatting, enjoying this rare time together. As night fell, Mike did not leave Anya's watchtower. They finally had the chance to truly dance together. In this enchanting atmosphere, what was about to happen next came naturally. After expressing their love, they lay on the sofa, gazing up at the starry sky. Watching the brilliant Orion constellation, Anya's eyes revealed deep longing. She remembered what her father had said, that he would bid farewell to the world on Valentine's Day. If Anya missed him very much, she should look up at the Orion constellation in the sky. Her father would transform into the brightest star, forever staying by her side. The next day, the two reluctantly said goodbye. Mike walked towards the rope, then quickly slid toward the opposite side. But fate seemed to enjoy playing tricks on them. Just as he reached the midpoint, a commotion suddenly erupted below in the canyon. It turned out to be those hateful hollow men. For some reason, they triggered the explosives on the cliff. In an instant, a deafening explosion shook the canyon. Before Mike could react, the rope snapped under the shock of the explosion. His body fell like a kite with a severed string, plummeting straight into the abyss. Anya witnessed this scene. She had no time to think and quickly rushed back to her room and packed up the gear she could use, then jumped into the canyon without hesitation. The wind whistled past her ears. She timed it perfectly to open her parachute. But just then, the mist in the valley underwent a strange transformation. It changed from white to yellow, emanating an ominous aura. Moments later, Anya fell into a rushing river. The icy river water instantly engulfed her. Anya struggled desperately in panic and finally managed to cut the parachute cords. Then she struggled to climb ashore using branches. On the other side, Mike was hanging upside down from a tree, unconscious. In a daze, he felt something slowly approaching him. However, when he opened his eyes, he was paralyzed with fear at the sight before him. A creature that looked very much like a caterpillar, but astonishingly large, was crawling toward him. Mike's heart raced violently with fear. He had no time to think and quickly grabbed his weapon, opened fire on the creature. After several shots, he finally destroyed it. Then he cut the rope and fell to the ground, but accidentally shattered some strange object. Mike didn't pay much attention and tried to get up, but to his horror, that the substance beneath him was like glue, sticking him to the ground. No matter how desperately he struggled, Mike couldn't break free from the restraint. What was even more terrifying was that sharp white objects suddenly emerged around him, shaped very much like the fangs of some creature, and they slowly began to close in. Clearly they were treating him as food. As Mike was about to meet his end, a familiar gunfire rang out. It was Anya who had arrived just in time. She accurately shattered those sharp fangs, then quickly stepped forward, using her knife to cut through the slime beneath Mike. Immediately after, the two decided to traverse the mysterious mist, heading toward the eastern cliff to find an escape strop. However, at this moment, the mist hung thick like a heavy curtain, hiding everything around them. They had no idea what dangers lay hidden within, only cautiously take steps forward. But just after a few steps, the atmosphere suddenly became eerily strange. The two gripped their weapons warily, with eyes scanning the mist continuously. At that moment, a mounted figure burst out of the fog. Anya had no time to dodge. She was knocked to the ground by the swiftly moving creature, and Mike was not spared either. He was knocked aside by another horse. The sight before him was even more shocking. The rider had a strange shape, with branches covering its body. A long knife was strapped to its waist. Mike instinctively guessed that this was one of the hollow men in the canyon, so the two fought back with all their might. But unexpectedly, the creature aided by the hollow horse moved at an astonishing speed. Its attacking power was also formidable. Fortunately, both of them were skilled in combat. Anya quickly adjusted her stance. With her agility, she shot down the hollow man that attacked her. Mike seized the opportunity during the creature's attack, shot down the strange hollow horse. The hollow man, now without its mount, seemed somewhat flustered. Mike took the chance to rush forward, struck the creature's head with the butt of his gun. He successfully killed it. However, unfortunately, the knife-wielding hollow man had already escaped in the chaos and vanished into the mist. Looking at the bony hollow man corpse, Mike was overwhelmed by an absurd thought. He crouched down to examine it closely and found that these hollow men were actually wearing military uniforms from the 1840s. This made him recall what Dre had said about the 2,400 cavalry who had disappeared after entering the canyon. They should have turned into bones ages ago, but why were their uniforms still found here? What secrets were hidden behind this? The two continued forward, filled with confusion. But the sight before them grew increasingly horrifying. The mountains were covered with trees twisted from white bones, whose faces were grotesque and terrifying, as if telling of unimaginable suffering. It made them feel a chilling fear deep within. After walking a bit further, Mike and Anya arrived at a construction area. The ground here was covered with cracks, as if it had experienced a violent earthquake. The buildings were covered in terrifying vines, slithering up the walls like venomous snakes. Terrifying howls echoed around them, the sound reverberating through the empty construction area, making the chill even more unsettling. The two immediately raised their guns in caution, then they hid in an abandoned church. But unexpectedly, the scene inside the church was even more shocking than outside. Each pew was filled with human skeletons. Mike stepped forward to examine closely and found that these people had died from cyanide poisoning. This made him fall into deep thought. What kind of terrifying existence could lead them to make such a choice? Could this place truly be hell? Anya didn't know how to comfort him. She could only look around the church. Just as she looked up at the church ceiling, a spider-like creature suddenly attacked from above, swiping its claws and knocking her to the ground. Immediately after, countless bone spiders surged into the church, attacking Anya and Mike. Both had ample combat experience and naturally did not show fear in the face of these creatures. However, at that moment, a large number of hollow men suddenly appeared in the church, leaving them momentarily overwhelmed. At this time, Anya took out explosives from her backpack. With a deafening boom, an escape route appeared before them. The two immediately ran out of the church. They successfully escaped in the end. But at this moment, the howls around them grew more intense. They had no choice but to hide in the canyon tunnel, blocked the entrance with debris inside, and then continued to explore deeper. However, when they followed the stairs down to the basement, the sight before them left them frozen in place. The room was covered in strange vines, twisted in shape like the tentacles of a demon. Various deformed human remains were scattered across the floor. The bones were broken unevenly. There was even glaring blood on the ground. The two suppressed their discomfort and carefully searched through the ruins. Just then, Anya found an old videotape. Her intuition told her that it might hold the key to uncovering the secrets. Mike quickly reacted. He rummaged through a corner piled with debris and finally found a generator that could still operate. They quickly connected the wires. As the engine hummed, they played the videotape. The black and white images flickered. A long-buried truth gradually surfaced. It turned out that during the late stages of World War II, the International League was fully engaged in developing nuclear weapons. They were even developing destructive biological missiles. And this remote canyon was the highest secret base of the League at that time. Unfortunately, a sudden 8.1 magnitude earthquake destroyed everything here. Amid the shaking and trembling, the base facilities were severely damaged. The biochemical weapons stored inside leaked completely. The biological genes in the canyon began to merge wildly. Although strong immune humans temporarily escaped disaster, once infected, terrifying mutation symptoms would appear within 5 days. To prevent the gas from spreading further, they finally chose to stay in the canyon and let themselves perish. Upon learning the truth, Anya and Mike felt a mix of emotions, but now the urgent task was to find a way to escape quickly. Soon they found themselves in another room, where they discovered usable computer equipment. From the style, it appeared to be a product from the late 2000s. It seemed that before this, another group of people had entered here. As the computer screen lit up, deeper secrets revealed themselves before them. It turned out that after the earthquake, a paramilitary organization named Black Fox took control of this place. But instead of choosing to blow up the canyon, they continued to develop biochemical weapons and used drones to collect samples of mutated creatures in an attempt to create a batch of super soldiers. The two immediately understood that this was the true secret they needed to guard. Immediately after, Mike opened a file named Stray Dog. Unexpectedly, this turned out to be the canyon's self-destruct program. As long as this area was exposed, the program would automatically start, blowing up the entire canyon. And the safe zone from thermal radiation was over 4.2 kilometers away. Without hesitation, the two decided to return to the exit to escape. Before leaving, they once again expressed their love and agreed to escape together. But unexpectedly, when they reached the door, they found that the backpack they had left behind was gone. Mike's expression instantly turned serious. He quickly realized that the hollow men seemed to have intelligence, so he slowly opened the door. The backpack was placed in a clearing further away, but there was no sign of any enemies around. He knew this was likely a trap. Anya quickly threw 2 smoke grenades. Then the two, using the cover of the smoke, approached the backpack cautiously with their guns raised. However, just as Anya grabbed the bag, a lasso suddenly flew out from the shadows, entangling her leg and dragged her into the depths of the mist. Mike didn't hesitate and chased after her. All the while, Anya struggled desperately. She tried to cut the rope with her knife, but the enemy was moving too fast. Her body was being dragged along the ground and she couldn't muster any strength. The hollow man rode on a horse, dragging her while glancing back to observe, as if wary of something. With no other options, Anya could only shoot her gun, but the violent jolting made it hard to aim. Eventually, she crashed into a tree root and lost consciousness. On the other side, Mike ran wildly, following the trail, finally arrived at the location of the biochemical weapon pit. A pungent odor permeated the air, as if it were the miasma from hell. But thinking of Anya, whose fate was uncertain, Mike dove down without hesitation. It was clear that this place was also in ruins. At this moment, Anya was hanging in midair, frantically twisting her body to try to break free. The hollow man approached menacingly, seemingly wanting to intimidate this restless woman. With a kind of fierce look in her eyes, she used all her strength to kick at the creature. The hollow man was caught off guard and staggered back uncontrollably. Taking the opportunity, Anya broke free and jumped to the ground. But at this point, the hollow man had been completely infected. It drew a military knife from its waist and began to slash wildly at Anya. Anya naturally would not back down and quickly countered. In this critical moment, she thought quickly on her feet. Anya grabbed a nearby torch and hurled it at the hollow man. At the same time, Mike arrived, following the sound of the fight. A few shots successfully killed the ugly creature. After confirming that Anya was unharmed, he carefully examined the clothing of the hollow man. But when he saw the identification on the clothing, Mike's heart sank in shock. This was actually the first Sentinel, Shawl, and the one who named the Hollow Men. The increasing strange events made Mike feel uneasy. He more urgently wanted to return to the lookout tower. However, at this moment, they found themselves in a missile silo. It was pitch black all around, only a sliver of light from the well above. The two took a deep breath and began to climb up with great difficulty. But moments later, they were met with a shocking sight. Due to the earthquake, the biochemical missiles to be damaged and leak, causing the nearby creatures had all mutated. At this moment, they seemed to be connected by some mysterious force. They emitted an eerie glow all over their bodies. Despite their twisted and mutated forms, the contours of their human shapes could still be vaguely recognized. They continuously emitted deep growls. The sound seemed to penetrate the soul, speaking of endless suffering. The two held their breath and focused as they crossed this area. Every step was taken with extreme caution. Just as they were about to reach the stairway, Anya suddenly stepped on something. Before she could react, the mutated creatures were awakened. Countless vines quickly reached out from the surroundings, entangling Anya as she tried to escape. Fortunately, Mike reacted quickly. He drew Shell's military knife and sliced through the vines. However, the crisis was not averted. The tentacle-like vines came at them in relentless waves, one wave after another, closing in on them. As the two were about to fall into despair, Anya immediately detonated an explosive. Then they managed to crawl back to the surface and discovered a warehouse not far away. Recalling that this used to be a military base, they stepped into the warehouse with a glimmer of hope. They found a World War II military vehicle there. What was even more surprising was that the vehicle was equipped with a winch for climbing. They could climb up the canyon using a metal cable. Hope ignited in their eyes instantly. Once Mike fixed the vehicle, they immediately drove toward the cliff. The chance to escape was right in front of them. Naturally, Anya and Mike were not willing to give up easily. The two provided alternating cover for each other. Soon they had shot all the approaching hollow men. Then Anya started the vehicle. The car began to climb up the cable. However, just as they breathed a sigh of relief, they noticed more and more hollow men climbing up from the bottom of the canyon. In an instant, they were almost within reach. Mike drew Shaw's military knife once more, ruthlessly stabbed at the hollow man beneath him. Anya quickly joined the fray as well. Just then, a hollow man suddenly launched a surprise attack from the side. Mike was caught off guard and stumbled from the impact. Fortunately, he managed to grab the railing of the vehicle in time, which helped him regain his balance. But at this instant, Mike thought of a way to escape. He quickly punctured the vehicle's gas tank. Gasoline gushed out immediately, flowing down the cable. Then Mike quickly climbed back onto the vehicle. He lit a signal flare and threw it down. As the military vehicle began to teeter precariously, the two decisively took out tools to cut the cable. The vehicle lost support and fell rapidly. Amid the violent explosion, they finally escaped from the terrifying monsters. They successfully escaped from this hellish abyss. After returning to the surface, Anya and Mike looked at the ruined canyon with complex emotions in mind. They knew that too many secrets and dangers were hidden here. To prevent further disasters, they made a bold decision, which was blow up this dangerous canyon and then leave. So they returned to the lookout tower. Mike routinely reported the situation to his superiors, but this time the response was no longer a cold, mechanical reply. The higher-ups suddenly initiated a conversation with Mike. They asked if he had ever entered the depths of the canyon. Mike was greatly shocked, but he quickly calmed down, then calmly replied that he had not. At this point, the tone of the higher-ups grew colder, because a computer system below the canyon had been activated. If it wasn't Mike who activated it, then it must have been someone at the lookout tower opposite. Thus, the higher-ups ordered him to execute the sentinel on the opposite side. To avoid suspicion, Mike accepted the order, but in his heart, he was planning how to deal with this crisis. What they didn't know was that the higher-ups had already seen their actions through the computer cameras. This conversation further confirmed Mike's betrayal. The higher-ups immediately decided to go to the canyon in person to personally eliminate these two traitors. The next morning, Mike and Anya began their respective actions. Just as they couldn't help but confess their feelings to each other, a helicopter suddenly roared overhead in the valley. Mike's expression changed slightly as he looked up. He saw the black fox emblem on the fuselage, then immediately realized that danger was approaching. He shouted angrily for Anya to run quickly. On the other side, when the higher-ups arrived at the lookout tower, he found that Mike had already vanished. The higher-ups were instantly filled with rage. He dispatched well-equipped drones to search for the two who were fleeing in the valley. These drones were highly maneuverable, and all were equipped with mini Gatling guns. They quickly located Mike, who was running through the dense forest, and launched a fierce attack on him. Fortunately, Mike was an excellent marksman, and he accurately shot down one of the drones. Anya was equally unwilling to back down. After skillfully dodging the bullet attacks, Anya gently pulled the trigger, shooting down both pursuing drones. Then the two quickly ran to the mountaintop. They found an excellent position and set up the sniper rifle aimed at the satellite launcher on the cliff. They had already laid the wiring there in advance. As long as one launcher exploded, it would trigger an irreversible chain reaction. Accompanied by deafening explosions, all the satellite launchers in the canyon were destroyed. Immediately, the lookout tower sounded a piercing alarm. The canyon was exposed on satellite imagery. The self-destruct sequence was activated. Anya and Mike hurriedly ran toward the safe zone. The higher-ups also rushed to board the helicopter. However, it was already too late. The helicopter was hit by a powerful shock wave, instantly losing control. It ultimately crashed into the cliff, resulting in a violent explosion. Meanwhile, Anya managed to escape the blast radius in time. But Mike, due to injuries to his legs, was ultimately caught by the explosion and fell into the water. Anya waited in the mountains for a long time, but she never saw Mike appear. So Anya went to West Island as agreed, hoping to reunite with her beloved one someday, until 2 months later. When she walked toward the dining table with a tray in hand, Anya was pleasantly surprised to discover that, sitting across from her was Mike, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. And with that, the film came to an end. This film, released on Valentine's Day 2025, boasts a stellar lineup with director Scott Derrickson, screenwriter Zach Dean, and stars Anya Taylor-Joy and Miles Teller. It certainly belongs to the anticipated before release category. This film, blending elements of science fiction, thriller, action, and romance, attempts to unfold a narrative about humanity and emotions set in a canyon. The story begins with a spy mission set against the backdrop of the Cold War. The two protagonists, a CIA agent and a Russian sniper, are sent to a remote canyon to carry out a mysterious mission. However, in the isolated environment, they gradually break down barriers. They move from hostility to cooperation, finally joining forces against supernatural monsters and a mysterious organization. The director aims to enhance the tension in character relationships through the canyon's enclosed space, such as their remote interaction through the sniper rifle and the life and death rescue after the cable snaps. This combines the thriller atmosphere with romantic elements, creating a unique dramatic conflict. Overall, this film is undoubtedly a remarkable work. Friends who are interested can check out the original film, The Gorge. If you enjoy my channel, please click to subscribe to my channel.